Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, The Intimacy Lab. Let me ask you something that may feel all too familiar. Have you ever sat across from a woman, her words tender yet distant, her gaze sometimes full of affection and other times completely unreadable? You feel like you're leaning in, trying to reach her, but somehow she's 2 steps ahead, weaving a web of mixed signals that leave you wondering, is this real, or am I just a player in her game? If you've ever felt that confusing mix of desire and doubt, of hope and hesitation, you're not alone. I know that ache, that frustration when you sense she's testing you, pushing your buttons, leaving you emotionally exposed while she holds all the cards. And yet you care, you want connection, real connection, but it feels like she's keeping you on a leash, only giving just enough to keep you chasing. But here's the truth, women's games are rarely about cruelty. They're often about insecurity, power dynamics, emotional control, and yes, sometimes self-protection. And if you don't recognize this, if you don't learn to step back, see the patterns, and respond wisely, you'll always feel like you're dancing on a string. So today, we're going to talk about how you as a man can outsmart these games, not with manipulation or coldness, but with clarity, confidence, and emotional strength. I'm so glad you're here. Take a breath and let yourself sink into this space. This is your time. The truth is, if you've clicked on this video, you probably know what it feels like when love turns murky, when what starts as connection begins to feel like a puzzle you can't solve. Maybe you've sensed the tug of attention and then the cold withdrawal, the late-night texts that spark hope only to be met by days of silence. And in those moments you wonder, is she genuinely interested or is she just playing? You see, in every relationship dynamic, there's an unspoken language being communicated beneath the words. Women who play games, consciously or unconsciously, are often navigating their own insecurities or testing your emotional posture. But the key is not to take it personally. This isn't about winning a battle of wits or proving your worth to her. It's about recognizing the game for what it is and reclaiming your own emotional ground. The first thing I want you to understand is this. A man who knows himself, who holds steady when emotions swirl around him, becomes unshakable. And that is exactly how you begin to outsmart any woman playing with your heart. Let's explore this together, slowly, with care. It starts by slowing down your responses. When a woman tests you with hot hand, cold behavior, with vague communication, with unpredictable affection, your instinct might be to react quickly, to seek clarity, to text back immediately, to ask, what's wrong, did I do something? But when you do this, you reveal your emotional dependence on her behavior. You show her that you are dancing to her tempo. Instead, I want you to sit with your emotions for a moment. When she disappears after an intimate evening or sends a cryptic message that makes you question yourself, notice your urge to react and pause. Give space. That space communicates confidence. It tells her and yourself that you will not allow your sense of emotional stability to be dictated by external whims. A man who slows down his responses makes her rethink her games because unpredictability loses its power when you are no longer immediately affected. That doesn't mean ignoring her or playing the hard-to-get role. It means showing restraint, composure, patience. When you slow your reaction, you reframe the dynamic. She starts wondering why you're so self-contained, so calm, so hard to shake. And in that stillness, you gain the upper hand not as a manipulator, but as a man who refuses to be controlled. Next, let's talk about nonchalance as strength. Often, when a woman plays games, she's reading your reactions closely, gauging how much power she holds over you emotionally. When you act visibly upset, jealous, or overly eager, you're feeding into the emotional tug-of-war. But when you adopt a stance of graceful nonchalance, genuine, not fake, you become intriguing. Nonchalance is not indifference. It's an attitude of I value you, but I value my peace more. So, when she flirts and then withdraws, when she cancels plans last minute, when she hints that other men want her, your response should feel lightly detached. Not angry, not cold, simply unbothered. When you greet her unpredictability with steady curiosity rather than anxious attachment, you disrupt the very dynamic she's trying to control. You can say something simple, warm, and yet clear. "Oh, sounds like you have a lot going on. Let me know when you're free and in the mood for something real." No chasing. No pleading, no sulking. You keep your dignity intact and your energy grounded. And here's where something subtle and beautiful happens. When you demonstrate nonchalance, she feels both your interest and your self-respect. She senses you are a man who can enjoy her, but who will never need her validation to feel secure. This brings me to another deeply powerful shift, holding clear boundaries without confrontation. A woman who plays games will often blur lines to keep control. She may suggest intimacy one moment and put distance the next, share secrets and then shut you out, make plans and then casually cancel them as though your time has no value. It's easy to get caught in the cycle of tolerating this, hoping that by being patient, she'll eventually commit. But patience without self-respect leads to exhaustion, not intimacy. So, when you feel that your time or emotions are being disregarded, speak softly but firmly. "I enjoy spending time with you, but I also value clarity. I prefer when plans are solid." You're not blaming or accusing, you're simply stating what you expect, with warmth and grace. Women respect men who can assert what they need without needing to control the woman in return. The key is that your boundary is not a threat. It's an expression of self-care. You're inviting her into a relationship dynamic where respect flows both ways, and if she's unwilling or unable to step into that dynamic, you remain serene. Because you're not trying to fix her behavior, you're simply choosing your peace over prolonged confusion. What I want you to feel deeply is this: when you stand calmly inside yourself, slowing your reactions, embodying nonchalance, and setting quiet but firm boundaries, you become a mirror that reflects back to her own behavior, and that reflection is powerful. It forces her to confront whether she's truly ready for the kind of connection you're offering. Now let's breathe here for a moment. Notice how different this energy feels from the usual advice that suggests counter. Games ignoring her completely or winning by manipulating her. We are not interested in manipulation. We're interested in maturity, in being a man who knows his worth so deeply that he never feels the need to prove it to anyone. And this is just the beginning. You've already started to reclaim your emotional sovereignty, to see her patterns clearly without judgment. The next step is to deepen this even further, to recognize when her games are a sign of deeper insecurity, and how you can respond in a way that protects your heart without closing it off entirely. So let's stay right here. In this gentle awareness, you're cultivating this understanding that her games don't define your worth, that your pace sets the tone, not hers. Now, imagine this next scenario. You've held your boundaries, you've embraced nonchalance, you've given her space, and yet she still sends confusing signals. One moment, she seems all in, texting, laughing, asking questions that feel intimate. The next, she withdraws, disappears, or suddenly becomes cold and critical. This can feel like whiplash, right? But I want you to see this behavior for what it often is: emotional inconsistency born from fear. Many women who play games are themselves wrestling with vulnerability. Perhaps she's afraid of being hurt. Perhaps she's testing whether you're a safe container for her emotions. Perhaps she's simply repeating patterns she hasn't healed from. Whatever the reason, it's not your job to fix it, but it is your job to protect your peace, and this brings us to something subtle but powerful: responding with radical self-focus. When she oscillates between warmth and distance, I want you to return your attention to your life, your values, your direction. Not out of spite, not to teach her a lesson, but because a man who is deeply invested in his own path becomes immune to manipulation. You become the center of your world, not her mood, not her approval, not her affection or withdrawal. You might gently acknowledge her inconsistency. Hey, I've noticed you seem a bit distant this week. I want to give you space, just know that I'm here when you're ready to show up fully. And then you step back gracefully, lovingly, and pour your energy into what nourishes you. Your work, your friendships, your passions, your health. You create an emotional reality where you are your priority, and that sends a powerful message. You are not waiting in limbo for her emotional stability. This isn't about detachment in the cold sense, it's about an elegant, dignified commitment to your own center. Women notice this. They sense when a man is no longer orbiting around their approval, but standing rooted in his own life. And in that space, they have a choice: rise to meet you with clarity or drift away. Either way, you remain intact. And let's go deeper still, listening more to behavior than to words. You see, a woman playing games may say all the right things. She may flatter you, compliment you, tell you she really likes you, or misses you, but then disappear for days or leave your texts unanswered. This is where many men get trapped, believing words over patterns. But words can soothe your ego, while her actions keep you off balance. Instead, become a quiet observer. Watch what she does, not in a judgmental way, but in a grounded, mature way. Ask yourself, is there congruence between her words and her behavior? Does she show up consistently? Does she invest in you emotionally? Or is she simply entertaining your attention as a way to feel validated herself? When you learn to listen to behavior rather than promises, you free yourself from false hope. You stop making excuses for her patterns. You no longer fall for the sweet text that follows days of neglect. This discernment is one of the most loving things you can do for yourself, because it ensures that your energy goes toward people who show up fully. And here's another shift that may feel counterintuitive, but is absolutely essential: never rewarding mixed signals. When she finally texts back after disappearing, when she gives you just enough affection after a period of coldness, it can feel tempting to respond enthusiastically, to affirm her, to jump right back into giving her attention. But this response rewards the very inconsistency that is confusing you. Instead, maintain your calm pace, respond warmly but measuredly. Show that you're available for connection, but only the kind of connection that feels stable and reciprocal. For example, if she reaches out after days of silence, you could say, "Good to hear from you. I'd love to catch up. When you're really present, let me know when that feels right." There's no blame, no anger, just a gentle acknowledgement that you are attuned to her pattern and that you will not dance to its tune. When you do this, you shift from being a participant in her emotional drama to being a sovereign man, a man who values clarity over confusion, depth over games, peace over chaos. And this shift doesn't just affect her, it changes you. You become a man who can spot emotional immaturity without needing to fix it. A man who can hold space for a woman's complexity without losing yourself inside it. As we move forward together, I want you to reflect on the kind of relationship you truly want. Not the fantasy, not the drama, but the deep, steady, nourishing love that feels like coming home to yourself. Outsmarting a woman who plays games isn't about tricks or strategies. It's about embodying a state of being where you are no longer susceptible to confusion, where you see clearly, act deliberately, and respond with grace. It's about leading with emotional intelligence, the quiet kind of strength that neither chases nor controls, but simply is. And when you hold that posture consistently, something extraordinary happens. You stop attracting games entirely. You start attracting women who are ready for truth, ready for clarity, ready for the kind of love that doesn't hide behind tests or mixed messages. So stay with me. You've already begun this journey, one that's less about changing her and more about changing your relationship to yourself. The more you practice these quiet shifts, slowing your reactions, embodying nonchalance, setting boundaries gently, focusing on your own life, listening to behavior rather than promises, the more you will find that peace replaces confusion. As we keep walking together, I want you to notice how you're already feeling different, lighter, perhaps clearer. You're no longer approaching these situations as a man who feels trapped in uncertainty, but as a man who has the tools to hold himself steady, regardless of what a woman's behavior may suggest. Now let's go even further into your own emotional intelligence. Don't mirror her games. This is such an easy trap to fall into. When she withdraws, you might feel tempted to withdraw too, not from a place of healthy detachment, but as a way to punish or teach her a lesson. When she flirts with others to provoke jealousy, you may want to respond by showcasing your own desirability, posting stories designed to trigger her insecurity, or dating other women purely to elicit a reaction. But here's the hard truth. When you mirror a woman's emotional games, you are no longer leading with your own integrity. You are allowing her behavior to dictate yours, and in doing so, you surrender your own emotional freedom. That is not sovereignty, that is reactive living. Instead, hold your ground, choose authenticity over strategy. If she flirts with others in front of you, there's no need to react with your own flirtation. You can simply acknowledge what's happening and let her see your calm disinterest in participating in games. If she goes silent, you don't need to match her silence with passive, aggressive withdrawal. You stay steady, consistent, clear about what you want, and you give her space to meet you there or not. This clarity has a profound effect. It brings everything into sharp relief. You stop creating noise and confusion, and instead make space for truth. And women, even those who play games, recognize when they are dealing with a man who will not stoop to the same level. That recognition either invites her to rise or gently clears her from your life. This is where another critical skill comes into play, communicating directly when needed. Sometimes a woman's games aren't subtle. Sometimes they escalate. Perhaps she deliberately tests you with jealousy, emotional hot hand, cold cycles, or passive-aggressive comments. In those moments, it's tempting to stay quiet, to play it cool endlessly, but maturity means knowing when to speak, too. Direct communication doesn't mean confrontation or criticism. It means calmly stating your observations and expectations with warmth and strength. For example, I value honesty and openness. When things feel inconsistent or unclear, it makes it hard for me to stay engaged. I'm looking for something deeper, and I'd love that with you, but it requires us both being real. And notice how this approach is neither pleading nor accusatory. You're not blaming her. You're simply naming what you see, setting the tone for a relationship that values emotional honesty over games. You're inviting her to rise to your level, not chasing her, not demanding, just standing tall and clear. When you communicate like this, you're sending a signal. I know what I want, and I will not shrink or compromise my peace to chase affection. That's incredibly attractive, not just in a romantic sense, but in a deeply human sense. It shows leadership, self-respect, and emotional maturity. And here's the deeper layer: trust your instincts. Sometimes a woman's games are so subtle that you start doubting yourself. You wonder if you're being too sensitive, too needy, too reactive. But when you are grounded in your own clarity and emotional intelligence, you begin to recognize those subtle signals for what they are. When something feels off, when her affection feels performative, her communication feels inconsistent, her warmth feels conditional, trust that feeling. You don't have to rush to label her or decide her intentions. You simply need to honor your own experience. Your gut is often wiser than your mind, especially in matters of the heart. Don't silence it for the sake of keeping the peace. So instead of getting stuck in self-doubt, lean into your own inner authority. You might say to yourself, I don't need to analyze her endlessly or decode her behavior. I only need to know how I feel and how I want to feel in a relationship. When you shift from asking, "Does she like me?" to "How do I feel in her presence?" you reclaim your power. At this point, something subtle but transformative begins to happen. You're no longer caught in the anxiety of trying to win her over or outsmart her games. You've stepped into a place where you see her games clearly. Respond with elegance and hold your emotional center firmly. And that's the ultimate key to outsmarting a woman who plays games, to realize that the smartest thing you can do is no longer play. When you embody these qualities, slowing your reactions, embracing nonchalance, holding firm but kind boundaries, focusing on your own path, listening to behavior over words, refusing to reward inconsistency, not mirroring emotional games, communicating directly and with grace, and trusting your own instincts, you become a man who is not just harder to play, but impossible to play. Because you are no longer seeking validation where there is confusion, you are no longer chasing affection that is given conditionally. You are standing in your full self, inviting her to join you in a space of honesty, clarity, and emotional maturity. And in doing so, you transform your entire relationship experience. You stop being drawn to women who manipulate, test, or confuse because your energy no longer resonates with those patterns. You start attracting women who crave the same emotional honesty you embody. You become a man who leads not with bravado, not with cold detachment, but with a quiet confidence that says, "This is who I am, this is what I want, and I won't compromise my peace for anything less." So breathe that in deeply. Feel the freedom of no longer needing to react, chase, or decode. You can love without losing yourself. You can care deeply while staying grounded. You can hold space for a woman's complexity without sacrificing your clarity. This is not just how you outsmart women who play games. This is how you elevate your entire experience of love. And now that we're here, I want you to feel the weight lifting from your chest. Because in this place of self-possession, you start realizing that women's games lose their grip over you not when you fight back or analyze them to death, but when you gently but firmly refuse to participate, when you rise above the pattern itself. Let's sit with this next reality, developing emotional fluency. See, a woman who plays games may not even realize she's doing it. Her patterns might come from childhood wounds, past betrayals, fears about vulnerability, or her own internal chaos. That's why emotional fluency, your ability to read what's unsaid while staying calm and empathetic, becomes a critical superpower. For example, imagine she suddenly criticizes you sharply after a weekend where you felt deeply connected. You might be tempted to react with defensiveness, to mirror her sharpness, or withdraw completely. But pause. Breathe, look deeper. Is this criticism her way of testing whether you'll stay when she's difficult? Is it an expression of her insecurity surfacing after closeness? Instead of meeting her criticism with your own edge, meet it with curiosity. That feels unexpected. What's really going on for you? Your calm, gentle curiosity disarms the emotional charge. You show her that you won't escalate conflict, that you're willing to see beneath the surface, but that you remain firmly grounded in yourself. This doesn't mean tolerating disrespect or allowing yourself to become an emotional punching bag, far from it. It means discerning when her game is actually a cry for safety, and that discernment makes you different from most men. It elevates you to the level of a man who doesn't fall for manipulation, yet has the sensitivity to see the human being behind the behavior. This is where you begin to feel your own growth. You're not just trying to win over a woman or outsmart her anymore. You're mastering your own emotional landscape. You're learning to respond thoughtfully instead of impulsively. You're seeing clearly where others get tangled in confusion. And as you embrace emotional fluency, another principle naturally emerges, moving from reaction to leadership. Women who play games often do so because they're accustomed to men reacting emotionally, anxiously, angrily, or passively. But when you shift from reacting to leading, the entire dynamic changes. Leading doesn't mean dominating. It doesn't mean controlling her or dictating the relationship. It means setting the emotional tone with calm, clarity, and confidence. It means saying through your actions and your presence, here's how I do relationship, here's how I show up, you're welcome to meet me here, but I won't be dragged into emotional chaos. For example, if she tests you by suddenly canceling a date last minute with a flimsy excuse, you can respond without frustration. I understand, let's reconnect when it feels easier for both of us. To be consistent, no bitterness, no game, playing just clarity, you're leading the interaction back toward mutual respect. When you lead emotionally, you model a different kind of relationship dynamic, one that refuses to revolve around power plays and confusion. And that modeling can gently invite her to shift her own behavior if she's capable and willing, and if she's not, then you've saved yourself from a relationship built on instability. This leads us to something tender but profound, learning when to walk away without resentment. One of the most painful patterns I see in men is staying too long in relationships where the emotional atmosphere is consistently filled with games, tests, confusion, and drama. Often men stay because they believe they can prove themselves into her affection, that if they're just patient enough, calm enough, generous enough, she'll stop playing games and finally give them her full self. But this belief keeps you locked in a cycle of self-sacrifice. It asks you to tolerate behaviors that diminish your peace in the hope that one day she'll change. And here's the truth, sometimes she won't, sometimes she can't, sometimes her emotional game playing isn't about you at all, it's about patterns she's not ready to heal. So you need to develop the courage to walk away gently, without anger, without bitterness, without needing closure or explanation. When you recognize that a woman's games are chronic, that her inconsistency is her norm, that her ability to show up is compromised, you can leave without resentment because you've been paying attention all along, you've been listening to her behavior, you've communicated directly, you've offered space for honesty. And now, with dignity, you can choose your peace. This is not a loss. This is a profound reclaiming of your time, your energy, your emotional freedom. When you walk away without resentment, you leave the door open for your own growth, for love that is honest, stable, nourishing. You teach yourself that you are worthy of a love that doesn't require endless decoding. So as we sit here together, I want you to reflect on all that you are learning, how to slow down your reactions, how to meet inconsistency with nonchalance, how to observe patterns without getting trapped in them, how to lead rather than react, and now how to know when it's time to gently let go. Because ultimately, outsmarting a woman who plays games is not about beating her at her own strategy. It's about stepping out of the entire dynamic and choosing a different way to love, one that is grounded, steady, and deeply self-respecting. And you'll know you're succeeding when you feel lighter, freer, and more at ease, when you find yourself less preoccupied with winning or figuring her out, and more focused on how you feel in her presence, when peace becomes your standard and drama no longer feels attractive. That's when you've truly outsmarted the games, not because you manipulated better or played harder, but because you simply refused to play at all. And now that you're breathing easier, no longer trapped in the cycle of reaction and confusion, I want you to feel something else awakening within you, an inner calm, yes, but also a new standard for how you engage with love itself. Because when you stop playing the game, when you stand still in your own dignity, you invite in a new quality of connection, one rooted in mutual respect, truth, and emotional maturity. But let's touch something that many men don't often talk about openly, the seduction of the game itself. See, sometimes the very drama you're trying to outsmart holds its own addictive pull. There's an energy in that chase, a thrill in the unpredictability, a rush in deciphering mixed signals, in wondering where you stand. And for some, this unpredictability becomes mistaken for passion. This is where your awareness matters most. You have to be honest with yourself. Have you grown accustomed to emotional highs and lows? Are you seeking intensity rather than intimacy? Because some women who play games aren't consciously manipulating you, they're simply offering the kind of emotional landscape that feels familiar, even if it's chaotic. And if your nervous system has learned to equate unpredictability with attraction, you might find yourself repeatedly drawn to these dynamics, even when you know better. That's why true freedom begins inside you. Outsmarting the game doesn't just mean recognizing when she's playing. It means recognizing when you're participating, even subtly, because you've become addicted to the drama itself. So pause, notice your patterns, ask yourself, do I crave her because she's good for me or because she keeps me off balance? When you realize that peace is more satisfying than drama, you stop chasing temporary validation. You stop mistaking emotional chaos for connection. You stop needing a woman's inconsistency to feel alive, and then something remarkable happens. You start setting a higher emotional standard, not just for her behavior, but for your own experience of relationship. You begin to understand that clarity, consistency, emotional safety, these aren't boring, they're beautiful. They're what allow deep intimacy to thrive. They're what allow love to be expansive rather than constricting. So the next time you encounter a woman who tests, teases, withdraws, and returns unpredictably, let your internal compass guide you toward a different response. Instead of reacting with anxiety or analysis, simply observe, does this feel emotionally safe? Do I feel respected? Do I feel peace? If the answer is no, you don't need to fight or explain or prove anything. You simply choose not to engage. You bless her from a distance and return to your own steady path, and that path, my friend, is not lonely. It's clear, it's dignified, it's filled with your own interests, your purpose, your friendships, your creativity, your health. It's filled with things that nurture your spirit rather than drain it. This brings me to another subtle shift, rewarding honesty and consistency with your full presence. Women who play games thrive on ambiguity, but women who are capable of mature, nourishing connection will meet you with honesty and consistency. And when that happens, when a woman shows up clearly, openly, without tests or manipulation, you must train yourself to value that as deeply as you once valued the chase. That means leaning in with presence when she communicates directly. That means rewarding honesty with your attention. That means letting yourself relax into relationships that feel easy, peaceful, grounded. Because often, men who have been caught in chaotic dynamics struggle to receive that kind of calm intimacy when it appears. It can feel foreign at first, even dull, simply because it lacks the adrenaline of the game. But over time, you'll discover that this is the deepest kind of seduction, a relationship where you are seen, respected, valued, and loved not for how well you navigate her tests, but for how authentically you can show up as yourself. So here you are, standing at the edge of a new way of relating. One that's less about decoding women's games and more about mastering your own emotional experience. You're beginning to recognize that true strength lies not in control or dominance, but in clarity, grace, and the refusal to engage in dynamics that cost you your peace. And this makes you rare, truly rare, because while many men will continue to get entangled in reactive patterns, you are learning to be different, calm, clear, steady, self-contained. You are becoming a man who can love deeply but wisely, with an open heart but firm boundaries. So let me remind you, you don't have to win every woman's affection. You don't have to prove yourself to anyone who can't meet you with respect. You don't have to chase validation through emotional chaos. You are already whole, already worthy, already enough, and in that wholeness, you become magnetic in the best way. You attract women who are ready for truth, for depth, for mature love. And you effortlessly repel those who thrive on inconsistency and games, not because you're cold, but because your presence no longer accommodates those patterns. The work you're doing here is not just about women, it's about you. It's about cultivating a relationship with yourself where you feel at home in your own skin, comfortable in your own company, grounded in your own emotional reality. So sit with this for a moment, let it sink in. You are redefining what it means to outsmart a woman playing games. You are stepping into a leadership role in your own life, a role where your self-respect, emotional intelligence, and clarity shape every interaction you have. And slowly, beautifully, this changes everything, not just how women see you, but how you see yourself. Now that we've walked this path together, I want you to pause and really feel where you are, not in relation to her, not in relation to what she does or doesn't do, but within yourself. Can you sense it, the shift that's already happening? The clarity that begins to settle into your bones, the quiet knowing that you no longer need to be caught in confusion or trapped in a cycle of reaction. You've begun to feel what it means to stand still in yourself, and from this place, no game can truly touch you. And yet there's one more truth we must touch before we close. When a woman plays games, whether consciously or unconsciously, what she is often testing is your emotional resilience. She wants to know, sometimes in messy ways, whether you can handle her complexity, whether you can withstand emotional storms without losing your center. But here's the paradox. The man who can withstand those storms isn't the one who fights to pass her tests. It's the one who knows when the storm is simply not his to weather. So what does this look like practically? It means that when a woman plays games, whether it's withdrawing affection to provoke a chase, sowing jealousy, canceling plans to see how you'll react, criticizing you to test your confidence, you become a master of graceful disengagement. You don't punish her, you don't correct her, you don't teach her. You simply opt out. You can say something kind, direct, and freeing. I'm looking for connection, not confusion. I respect where you are, but this doesn't feel aligned for me. There is no bitterness in this, no sarcasm, no anger masked as cool indifference, just a clear boundary spoken with warmth and self-respect. And here's the most liberating part. This isn't just about her. It's about you realizing that peace is now your standard. You don't have to fight for clarity, you choose clarity. You don't have to beg for consistency, you value it naturally. And because you value it, you offer it in return as a man who is available, present, strong, and clear. This is what makes you truly attractive, not just to women but to life itself. Because your energy is no longer scattered, no longer anxiously seeking approval, no longer invested in deciphering mixed signals. You radiate steadiness, self-respect, confidence that doesn't need to be loud or performative. It just is. And when you move through the world this way, you draw in women who are ready to meet you here, women who are done with games themselves, women who long for the kind of partnership that feels like an exhale, not an exhausting test. So breathe with me here. Feel how far you've come. You've learned to slow your reactions, to pause and create space before responding. You've embraced the power of nonchalance, showing warmth, but never allowing yourself to be emotionally shaken by inconsistency. You've learned to hold boundaries softly, speak directly, trust your instincts, and listen more to behavior than words. You've stopped rewarding inconsistency with your attention and learned to step away when the dynamic no longer honors your peace. You've stopped mirroring games and chosen instead to lead with grace. You've developed emotional fluency, the ability to understand the patterns beneath the surface, and now you know that the greatest way to outsmart any woman playing games is simply to elevate standards so high that those games can't survive in your presence. But let's make something very clear. This isn't about coldness or detachment. This isn't about becoming hardened or jaded or emotionally unavailable. It's about maturity. It's about loving from a place of self-possession, offering your care freely but never at the cost of your dignity. So as you step back into your life, I want you to remember this. You don't have to chase, decode, prove, or fight for the kind of love that's meant for you. The right woman won't play games. She won't keep you guessing. She won't manipulate you with silence or provoke you with tests. She'll bring her own emotional clarity to the table, and together you'll co-create a relationship that feels like home. And until that woman appears, you hold your peace like the treasure that it is. You protect your energy. You choose relationships that feel nourishing over relationships that feel exciting but chaotic. You become the man who sets the emotional tone, who leads with confidence and kindness, who knows exactly what he wants and refuses to settle for less. This is the art of outsmarting games, not by outplaying them, but by simply not needing them anymore. And so, as we close, I want to leave you with this final thought. Love, real love, is a place where games dissolve. Where honesty, consistency, respect, and emotional generosity thrive. When you cultivate these qualities within yourself, you naturally attract them from others. And when you no longer tolerate chaos disguised as passion, you free yourself for the kind of relationship that brings peace, depth, and fulfillment. You deserve that. You always did. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this conversation resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to share your experiences in the comments below. And if you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe to the Intimacy Lab for more soulful, intelligent, and honest conversations about love and relationships. Here's to your peace, here's to your clarity, and here's to the beautiful relationships you will create from this day forward.